This is the Weigh In podcast, and on this week's Weigh In for you guys, we're gonna bring to you the holistic topic of claw wrestling. So we're gonna dump into what is claw wrestling. We're gonna jump into that and the foreseeable sites here and how we feel about this new stuff coming, and then we're gonna touch base on Sammy Alvarez. I say this because, news hit he's jumping back into the transfer portal. And you kind of say, has the best already come for Sammy? And you really got to think about that. And while you think about that, we'll jump into the claw wrestling and we'll leave Sammy for second. But that is this week's weigh-in. So if we jump right in, the foreseeable, what is claw wrestling? If you've seen a lot of claw wrestling is a freestyle wrestling league, freestyle based wrestling league, which is really good. And why I say for the foreseeable future, why I talk about the foreseeable future and what is foreseeable for claw, is because there's a lot of good things for claw, and why I say the foreseeable future is because claw wrestling is, it has the ability, they posted a photo and of a big arena and said, can't wait till we get here. It's going to get there. I think the thing is about there's not enough people in the wrestling community that understand what it is. And I also think, you kind of got to get down a little bit of, some of the, I feel like you got to put down some of the formatting, but I like how he's starting now. You're kind of running it where you're kind of, he picked GMs this year. And this is, in no way, shape, or form is this, I want to say, 100% accurate. I'm going off of what my beliefs here. So, but what is true is GMs were picked, it's kind of getting started. So it's kind of like you're getting it going. I think what's going to be huge here is going to be the aspect of almost, yeah, we're building this here, but now I think what's going to make this get bigger is the aspect of almost, building it in a way where these are guys that are going to make money. It's professional league wrestling, for the NCAA and United World Wrestling, style wrestling. I say NCAA, but that's what I'm saying. But I kind of say the way this is shaping up, great. But I think what's going to make this really different here is that you're getting off the ground, but I think why people are so hesitant to think, is this just another ventured out thing in the wrestling community, is because it's kind of like, okay, it doesn't have that format of like the NFL or the NBA right now. It has a format of like, we're a lot of you might not remember this. They've done this style before. It was, oh my God. I'm not remembering right here, but it was a draft. You know what? Well, I'm gonna put a pin in that note, and when I do remember it, I will say it. But they did do something similar to this, and it didn't kick off as quite as the way you would have thought. I think the problem is, you got to build this almost similar. I understand you want to do right now. It's good to grow it with the guest GMs. I like that, but as you start to see good numbers, you got to start saying you got to take an NBA route with this. You've got to start saying if this is going to be a serious wrestling league, you've got to start saying I can't keep doing. Now you can always keep that format, as we know from the TikTok of the Georgia baseball team, the Bananas or the Bananas or something like that. You can always turn something fun, but I think coming into wrestling, I think wrestling is a serious enough of a sport that it's very hard to turn that into something fun. We say, okay, we're picking GMs and these are the teams. And I understand, the success rate of leagues is not, it's not easy. There are leagues that fail all the time. Like, they had the football league past when a couple of years ago that failed, not enough money. I understand you're trying to not take this leap and jump, the way it is, but I think the wrestling community, I think they're doing it right. I don't think there's any other way to see this because, you understand that dipping your foot in just a little bit and saying this is what claw is great, but there comes a time when you're going to get to that point where you got to stop dipping the foot and say, hey, now this is a new wave. But then now you have to take the guys that are already on the teams you've now started, and you have to say, hey, we got to somehow find a way to keep those guys so we don't lose those guys. And I think that's an aspect that you have to say you want to keep. But I also say there's another aspect here where you have to say to yourself, when that time comes, you got to build. You got to build. You got to take these wrestling greats like, you know, like John Smith and guys that have like Daniel Cormier and guys like that have done so well and Ben Askren and say, hey, and and the Rock Johnson, or the Rock who's been getting himself into a lot of, not wrestling but wrestling. He's been in that WWE side, or you look at guys that like Brock Lesnar or like Quentin Rampage Jackson, who some of these guys that used to wear the singlet. You look at those guys and you say you got to reach out to those guys that got a buck in a pocket and say, hey, we need to build teams. We need to find owners. You need to buy in ownership and say you can buy this team, and you need to start. I understand it takes a lot because you got to get plentiful through the league. You got to get a lot of money through it. I understand. We understand that. But what's going on is that's going to be made by this dabbing the foot, this pick the GMs right now and let that go, but what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of, and this is a good shift. You're going to get two types of wrestlers. You're going to get a wrestler that wants to make the world team, become an Olympic and a world champ. And then you're going to get the wrestler that doesn't think he's good enough. And I think you're going to get a lot of good wrestling out of Claw. I think you are, but I think you are going to get a lot of good wrestling. I think that was a solid choice. But some of the biggest wrestling, and I say this because, the biggest covered wrestling, most watched, is the NCAAs. And the NCAAs is scholastic. And the only reason why I'm up against, all love for a freestyle league, only reason why I say differently from a league is because you get a good showing with the NCAA wrestling and scholastic, because freestyle you don't really get overtime. You don't really get it's kind of hard to go into a freestyle match with a 0-0 score with 30 seconds left, or a 1-1 score without one guy saying one guy trumps, or not trumps, but one guy beats another because he's now scored last. And it's just all, a way to go about it. That's just freestyle. But you seriously say to yourself, what's going to happen here is I think Claw's going to succeed. Claw's going to be very well great. Claw's going to thrive. I believe it. But now with leaving your open-ended of no scholastic ends to it, there's probably going to be somebody, like I said, like Brock Lesnar, like plentiful wrestler, rich in wrestling history, probably he's had a lot of wrestling, who's going to probably rule a scholastic. And the only reason why I say a scholastic is going to probably grow bigger, and I only say that because you look at how well a viewing we get with NCAAs. I think you can go to, I want to say 9 out of 10 wrestlers, and they will tell you they've seen NCAAs. When we were in high school, I mean, not we, but probably, but when I was in high school, I remember my coach was telling me, hey, who saw NCAAs last night? It was very few, always said who saw the Olympics. Very few did you see, oh, did anybody see the world tournament? Anybody see Worlds? It was said, but not to the capacity of like, who saw NCAA's last night? You see Big Tens? Look at Big Tens. Who saw that dual meet last night? Like, okay. Look at the crowds, Ohio State, Penn State. I'm talking Kyle Snyder years used to pull. Like, I'm telling you, there is a big wave. Now, I understand, there is a lot of partaking in Scholastic that it is good. And there's people that are already trying to say NCAA wrestling should be freestyle, but there's a level of competition in Scholastic. There's a level of the competitiveness at that NCAA level when you go into an overtime that next 30 seconds, and just because that guy scored the last 1 point, he's not up. He's got to now fight for it, and at the level of freestyle, you kind of see it like when you see like the last couple matches Jordan Burroughs got beat by. You look at that and you're like, they haven't been plentiful, but you could say, Zahid, Valencia, and Dake looked really well. So there are some matches that come out really well. There are some stuff that comes out really well, but you ever thought like, okay, Zahid Valencia beat Dake. Would he ever beat Dake in a Scholastic match? That's the question you should be asking yourself. But I do understand Claw's going to succeed. Claw wrestling looks really well, and I say this as in like the episode's about Claw, but this isn't no free brand deal here. This isn't I'm not being paid to talk about Claw here. I'm just telling you that I think this is really great for the community in the sport of wrestling, and I see what's going to come of this because as you all know, you always had the American Football League and the NFL. The rules are different. You have the AHL, you have the NHL. So I do kind of see where there may be, and you know what? And this is great to say because they've had a similar format like this in India for a long time, where they got it, it's plentiful over there. Like money's made. They got a wrestling league where they have teams. It's full freestyle. Bam, they got it going. Like, I think you look at Claw, and it has nothing to do with financial right now. It has all to do with just the eyes. Like if it gets the right eyes and it gets the right people wanting to pack an arena and walk in there and say, "Wow, this is going to be good." It's a Claw wrestling league. I think it's going to get there, but I think you got to build sobriety here. Like you got to build a large sobriety here. You got to build it. You got to really build it in a way where you got to get the best guys you can. And this year it's looking good because the guys that they have announced have entered in the draft. They didn't give us the names of those guys, but they gave us, a couple All-Americans, I believe world medalists. It's looking really good. And what you want, I think what you would want to believe is stack every team. When you look at it, okay, if I kind of look at it like this: are these guys Kel Sanderson could have made national champ? That's how you get started. There, that's how you get started. Legit. That's how you get started here. And you got to say to yourself, because if you build really good matchups, you give it the right eyes, you grow it, then you start turning like all these other leagues into money. Like you get a TV deal lined up. That's going to be game changing. I think for wrestling right now, there's not enough coverage. I understand, Big Ten shows the Big Ten. We get NCAA's on ESPN, but there's not enough coverage. Now, the weigh-in posted about this 2 years ago. I believe it's 2 or maybe 3 now. There was a regular dual meet on ESPN, and they said it was the most watched. Something, don't quote me on this, but close enough. It was the most watched event on ESPN in a while. It had high viewership. And I believe the problem with the community of wrestling right now has nothing to do with the wrestling, has nothing to do with the coaches, the rules. It has everything to do with the coverage it gets. The coverage it gets. Like, I think All About if wrestling gets that coverage. Real different. I think the sport grows. The only reason why it hasn't is because the coverage. You look at people in the middle of the week are watching a dual meet on ESPN on television because they want to see wrestling. I think the first TV station that gets out here and says we're gonna give wrestling a chance. They're gonna make a lot of money. They're gonna get a lot of eyes. It's gonna be a lot of coming together of the wrestling community. Say, oh, for instance, if you say, okay, dual meet now on Iowa, you look at, okay, let's say this. Penn State, Oklahoma State on TNT. Right? Nice coverage. Think about it. Claw wrestling now on TNT. Right? Think about it. That coverage. Oh, there's wrestling on TNT. Huh. Other than it being WWE style, you say, right? Right? So when you think about it and that manifests, you think about, okay, you almost say, okay, once that coverage is there, and Claw starts getting that money running through it with these high crowds, and you're packing arenas, you're packing rec halls, it comes a point where you say to yourself, yep, Claw's looking really good. Claw's where it should be. This is getting well. This is getting good. And I think it's going to succeed. I think it's a great thing what they're doing when you look at Claw wrestling. I think it's really well, and the message that this is sending even across the community. You look at now you look at so many that are growing up that now know, okay, there's something to look forward. It's not just Olympic wrestling anymore. Now it's like, I want to make Claw. And I think that's a good way to think about it. I think that's really, really good. And that's a really good thing for the community of wrestling, you know, and that's a really good thing. I think that's gonna really put Claw up differently. So let's by all means let's check about the views. So right now they got 22.8K following on Instagram. We're just checking Instagram. This is gonna get good. This is gonna get good. And I say this because the wrestling is gonna be real nice. And that's what I say. So some of Claw wrestling looks really well, and some of it looks really good. And I say that for a reason, because you look at some of it, it's really good. It's really good wrestling out of Claw. It's really good wrestling. And I say that because it's been growing, and I think it's going to be always growing, and I think it looks really good, and I think there is a level of looking really good. Like some of the guys that get in there look really well. And I say that because they're doing really good things when it comes to Claw, and I think that's really good. I think, in terms of what they're doing is really well. You know, I like how they're gonna have the first draft, Atlantic City. Amazing. So they're kind of getting this off very well. And I think it's really getting getting really good. So that's really good. And I think the growing of claw is going to be really well. So, I think the biggest thing I would say here is I'm gonna check back myself here, you know, and instead of saying, hey, I'm gonna check back myself here, and I'm gonna check back for many of reasons. I'm gonna check back myself because I do believe that claw may be scholastic. So don't quote me on whether it's scholastic or freestyle. So that's one thing I'm going to touch base here that I was wrong. That I was wrong here that it is not one way nor the other as I'm trying to look at the rules here. Yeah, so we're gonna look at it's claw style rules. I'm reading right off their website. So let's see. Folk style. I said scholastic before. I meant to say folk style. So here's what I'm gonna say here. It's a combination of freestyle and folk. So that's the official ruling here. I'm reading it right from the website, right from that website. So really, I was wrong. It is more tends to be more. I guess you would say freestyle, but it's more of a I would say a customized ruling here. It's not one way nor the other. It's actually it's a combination of both. So, I kind of say even then, even with all of that saying, I still think it's going to grow. There is no rhyme or way where I say claw doesn't grow. I still think claw is going to grow. And I say that because it's looking really good. And I say that because they're doing really good things. So I do take back that. I do say that, but you know, I do say that. So I will thrust back myself on that. As much as that is a good way to go. Now, if we touch a little base on this Sammy Alvarez, because we didn't really touch Sam, we've really been all about claw. I understand what claw wrestling is, but for those who understand, who remembers a claw ride, a good claw ride? That's what, like, when I saw claw wrestling, I'm like, man, that couldn't be more wrestling than it gets. Good claw ride. Um, so that's something that's really pretty good. So it's called Championship League of American Wrestling. If if anybody wanted to know, um, they did have a few matches going before they did some wrestling, but now they're officially launching, where it's the official launch. That's what they say. So this is so let me get you the stats here. As we are supposed to talk about Sam, but let me get you them stats. 27 NCAA All-Americans, 21 NCAA qualifiers Division One, 4 members of world teams from other countries, and 10 accomplished Greco and freestyle wrestlers. That's gonna be looking good. Gonna be looking good. So claw wrestling. Claw wrestling looking really good. So that's really good. The draft is July 21st in Atlantic City. So that should be real nice. And Harris is in Atlantic City. Nice. One of the general. So let's run you those general managers. One of the general managers, Billy Baldwin. Billy Baldwin is one of the general managers. That is what I'm talking about. So I take back some of the stuff I say. Now you're getting some of these wrestling history guys in here that like wrestling. So that's looking really good. And so let's go ahead and tell you who these are. Hansel, I apologize on the mispronunciation, is the Cradle City Cicadas. Anthony Robles is GM of the Hammers. Angelo Ferrari's got the Leopards. Matt Kings is Billy Baldwin, and Giorgio Parolio is of Team Chaos. So that's looking really good, and I believe there's one more team, but I'm gonna see if they have it here. If they don't, they don't. It's not really that big of a deal. Um, so they have not picked a GM for the Enforcers yet. So that being said, but other than that, Claw looking really good. I remember there was a time where Jordan Oliver wrestled for him at one point. So it's looking really good. But any which way, I think this is going to grow, and I think this is growing in a good way. They got the first inaugural draft and that they're getting going. That this isn't just putting a couple guys on a team and paying them. This is legit. For the wrestling fan, this is really big. But we get back to Sammy. Has the best already came for Sammy? Yes. I believe he's seen what he's seen. There were some good seasons out of Sammy, but his best seasons were when he was in Rutgers. Those were the best years. And then, not being able to stay at Oklahoma, then moving on and going to Ryder. Now not staying at Ryder. I think you've got to seriously ask yourself, did he fall off? And the answer to the question is both. Yes, because he's not at the high level he used to be. No, because he still was an All-American last year. So there's a difference there. He still, I believe, again, don't quote me on it. I believe he still was an All-American last year. So when you look at Sammy, you look at somebody who's high level and looks really well. So when you look at Sammy Alvarez, old Sammy, you look at somebody who has done a lot. So if we look at it, All American, confirmed. So now we look at All American Sammy Alvarez leaving. So he's worn a lot of different singlets, and that's going to be interesting to see where he lands. But a lot of different singlets have been worn by him. Rutgers, Oklahoma, Ryder, and now possibly going to be another new one. So that's interesting. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Now, do I think that Sammy can't still make something out of his career? So, he can always surpass and I can always be wrong. And I say that because, everybody's always wrong at some point, unless you're Kill Sanderson, you get some of the best guys. But there's always that expertise that it could always happen. So, I do kind of look at it and say, hey, I can still be wrong in a way, but I don't think I am here. I think Sammy's got the best look. I think Sammy, has had what he can, but I still think he's a great wrestler. I don't say he has fallen off totally, but I say it's really good. There are some wrestlers that, you see them leave and they fall off. So, you know, I know that we said we're gonna have a little bigger touch of Sammy, but that was a little touch. He as I say, he's a Jersey brother, Jersey boy. I'll always root for New Jersey wrestlers because I kind of feel like you bring some New Jersey brings some top level wrestlers. As much as people may try to say, well, look at what PA brings or all those arguments. Look, some of your greatest Olympic wrestlers like Jordan Burroughs, Jersey boy. You know, there's a lot of Jersey boys out there that have done some really good stuff. Really good stuff. The conversation of who's got better wrestling between Ohio, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, um, it's always going to be a conversation, but nonetheless, Jordan Burroughs, great wrestler, and there's a lot more that we talk about. A lot of them, a lot of them, a lot of good Olympic wrestlers from New Jersey look good, but needless to say, yet another epi of the weigh-in, bringing it to you guys, because that is always the goal. Bring you guys another episode. So I brought you guys yet another one. We'll be closely following this Claw Wrestling League and be more on that. And best of luck to everybody. We'll see how it goes with this Claw and how big they get, and we'll go from there. But with that being said, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And just hang in there for the fans of the weigh-in. You hang in there. We're bringing you the episodes in this wrestling off season. So it's off season up till we get our final X Shockers, and then we get this Claw. So we're going to be following a lot of Claw in this off season. And Olympic World Wrestling. And while we do all of that, we bring you that. But please, we're going to try to keep up with the latest stuff that we can, when we can. And for that, we will be bringing to you guys the best content we can bring, So with that being said, again, like, comment, subscribe, share. This is The Weigh-In by Ben Chestnut and normally Sebastian Romero. But as you know, we will return to our regularly scheduled program soon. So this is The Weigh-In. Out.
The Weigh-In, where stories ignite.